You didn't think you were marrying a committee. The vows said two of you. The officiant said two of you. The cake, the rings, the rented chairs in his cousin's backyard. All of it staged around the beautiful lie that this was a union of two people who chose each other. Then your phone buzzes at 6:47 in the morning, and it's not him, and it's not your mother. It's a thread of 41 unread messages titled something like, "The Fam." And somewhere in there, between a prayer hands emoji and a photo of his aunt's blood pressure monitor, is the news that you and your husband are apparently trying for a baby. You are not trying for a baby. You learn this is being discussed roughly the same way you learn most things now. Late, secondhand, and with reactions already attached. Welcome to the marriage. You'll be receiving the agenda shortly. 1. The other altar. On paper, you married a man. In practice, you married a man and the 17 people who have his location turned on. Nobody warns you about this part because it doesn't show up at dinner. He arrives alone. He's charming, attentive, the kind of partner who remembers your coffee order and texts back fast. Suspiciously fast, you'll later understand, because his thumbs never really rest. There's a parallel conversation running under every conversation you have. You're talking to him about the weekend. He's talking to them about the weekend, in real time, 3 rooms deep into a thread you can't see. You felt it before you could name it, a small lag. You'd tell him something, your job interview, your sister's diagnosis, the apartment you wanted to look at, and he'd nod with the gentle patience of a man receiving old news. Because it was old news, it had already aired. You were the rerun. Group chats run American families now, quietly, the way the thermostat runs the house, invisibly until you touch it. Messaging apps have become the default channel, prized specifically for how well they manage groups, and his family weaponized that feature into a full-time intelligence operation with a casserole recipe cover story. The cruel part is how much it looks like love. They're close. Everyone says so, usually his mother, usually about herself. They share everything. They support each other. And you, standing at the edge of it, the newest hire with the least seniority, get to decide whether closeness is the right word for a system where information about your own life reaches you last. You married into a democracy. You just don't have a vote yet. 2. The welcome packet. At first, being added felt like an honor. You remember the day. He turned his phone toward you, a little shy, and said his mom wanted to add you to the family chat. You said yes the way you'd say yes to anything early on. Eager, grateful, mistaking access for belonging. A flurry of welcomes rolled in. 3 hearts from a cousin, a gif of a dancing minion from an uncle who has never once spoken to you in person. His mother typed a paragraph. You typed something back you rewrote 4 times, because you already understood, on some animal level, that you were being evaluated. You were right. You just didn't know how long the probation lasted. Nobody hands you the rules, so you reverse engineer them. You learn that there is a correct response time, and it is faster than you think. You learn that not reacting to a photo of his grandmother's tomatoes is itself a statement. You learn that the chat has a tone, relentlessly cheerful, aggressively present, and that any deviation from it reads as a problem with you. You start performing enthusiasm for vegetables. You become fluent in a dialect made entirely of exclamation points. And slowly, the welcome reveals its other face. The chat that embraced you is the same chat that monitors you. You post that you and your husband are taking a trip, and within minutes, his mother knows your itinerary, your budget concerns, and her own opinion about the airline. You mention you're tired. Someone asks if you're pregnant. You are not tired in a fun way. You are tired because you live inside a feed that never stops refreshing. This is the quiet trick of the enmeshed family. Therapists describe enmeshment as the diffusing of personal boundaries until individual identities blur together and autonomy gets sacrificed to closeness. And the group chat is enmeshment with a notification sound. It doesn't feel like surveillance because surveillance doesn't usually come with birthday emojis. It feels like family. That's the genius of it. The walls are made of affection, which makes them very hard to complain about without sounding like a monster. You start to notice the things you've stopped saying. Small edits. You don't mention the fight you had, because it'll be litigated by people who weren't there. You don't share good news first, because you've learned the chat will share it back to you. You curate, you manage, you become the press secretary for a marriage you're supposed to be living. The welcome was real. So was the leash. They came in the same notification. 3. Everyone knew before you. Here is how information moves in your marriage. It does not move from him to you. It moves from him to the chat, and from the chat to you, like weather reaching a valley last. By the time it gets to you, it's already been discussed, voted on, and gently editorialized. You find out his cousin is getting divorced from a praying for them message, not from your husband, who is apparently known for 6 days and simply forgot that you were a person who didn't already know. You find out you're hosting Thanksgiving from his aunt's reply confirming she'll bring the green beans. You find out your husband took a new job, because his mother posted, "So proud of my boy," before he'd mentioned the offer to you over a dinner you were, at that exact moment, cooking. The first time, you think it's a fluke. The 40th time, you understand it's the architecture. You are not in the inner ring. You sleep next to the man in the inner ring, and you fold his laundry, and you carry his last name. But the actual nervous system of this family runs through a thread you can mute but never leave. What it does to you is subtle and corrosive. You stop being surprised, which sounds like peace but is actually a kind of surrender. You learn to nod at news you're hearing for the first time, performing a calm you don't feel, because admitting you didn't know would mean admitting your rank. So you say, "Yeah, he mentioned about things he absolutely did not mention." You lie about being informed to protect the fiction that you matter. The loneliness of it is specific. It isn't the loneliness of being unloved. He loves you. That's not in question. It's the loneliness of being adjacent to the conversation that decides your life. Marriage researchers consistently find that conflict with in-laws is among the top stressors for married couples. And you understand why now, in your body, at 6:47 a.m. It isn't the in-laws themselves. It's the org chart they refuse to admit exists. You are the spouse. You should be the first call. Instead, you're the daily digest. 4. His mother has read receipts. Let's talk about her, because everyone else does. She is, by her own account, not like other mothers-in-law. She is right, though not in the direction she means. She is the admin. She started the chat. She names the chat. She changes the chat's emoji on holidays. When the chat goes quiet for an unusual stretch, she sends a, "Everyone okay?" That is less concern than census. She does not dislike you. That would be simpler. She has, instead, fully absorbed you. Into the feed, into the schedule, into the running commentary, without ever quite letting you become separate from her son. Because to her, he was never separate. The boundary that's supposed to form when two people marry, the thing therapists romantically call the couple bubble, never got to inflate. She was already inside it. She'd been living there for 34 years and saw no reason to move out for a woman she met in 2021. You watch your husband around her, and you see a different man. Younger, smaller. A man who texts his mother before he texts you, who routes decisions through her with the unthinking ease of a kid asking permission. He doesn't see it. That's the part that undoes you. He genuinely doesn't see it, because to him, water has no opinion about being wet. And the research is quietly brutal here. A longitudinal study following 371 couples across the first 16 years of marriage found that partners who disagreed about how close they should be to the in-laws were more likely to divorce than couples who agreed. Read that twice. It isn't closeness that ends marriages. It's disagreement about closeness. It's two people standing on opposite sides of one group chat, one of them seeing family, the other seeing a hostage situation with snacks. She'll outlast every argument you don't have. She has read receipts and infinite patience. 5. The united front that faces the wrong way. There's a moment eventually when you say something. You pick it carefully. Not an ultimatum. You're not stupid. Just a small, reasonable request. Could we tell each other things before the chat finds out? You rehearse it to sound calm. You strip the resentment out until it's practically a customer service tone. And you watch your husband's face do the thing. The thing is a flinch that becomes defense. Because you didn't critique a habit. You critiqued his family, which to him is the same as critiquing the air he breathes, the people who raised him, the entire emotional infrastructure of his life. Every relationship expert will tell you the couple is supposed to present a united front to the outside world. The cruel comedy of your marriage is that the front exists. It's just pointed at you. He and his mother are aligned. You're the outside world now. So you get the speech. They mean well. That's just how they are. You're reading into it. His mom is sensitive. Can't you just let it go? For him, for peace. And under all of it, never said but always there. You knew what you married. Did you, though? You knew he was close with his family. Everybody's husband is close with his family. Until you discover the definition includes a live feed of your menstrual cycle. What you didn't know was that closeness had a direction, and the direction was always going to be away from you when it mattered. You learned that an argument between you and him is never just between you and him. There's a jury, there's a thread, there's a screenshot somewhere of something you said in a vulnerable moment, now living in his sister's phone with a laughing emoji underneath. You stop fighting for first place. You start negotiating for second. 6. The mute button is a love language. You develop rituals. Everyone in your position does. You mute the chat, which feels like an act of war and accomplishes nothing, because the news still reaches you, just delayed by your husband's face when he asks why you didn't react to his nephew's soccer photo. You learn to scroll the backlog in the bathroom at parties, catching up on the family you're standing inside of. You craft your replies like a hostage, proving they're unharmed, warm, prompt, generic, alive. You build a second marriage in the gaps, the real one. The one in the car with the radio off, in the kitchen at midnight, in the rare, unmonitored hour where it's just the two of you and no phone is buzzing with the opinions of people who weren't invited. In those hours, you remember why you did this. He's funny. He's kind. He reaches for your hand without looking. The man you married is real. He's just also a group administrator's most loyal member, and you've stopped expecting those two things to ever fully reconcile. You start screenshotting your own moments, hoarding them, building a private archive of a marriage that isn't broadcast. A small rebellion, proof that some part of this belongs only to you. It's not nothing. Some days it's enough. 7. The final truth. Here's what nobody tells you about marrying into a family that knows everything before you do. The problem was never the information. It was never really the chat, or the emojis, or the mother-in-law with the unbeatable patience. The chat is just the thing you can point at. The real wound is older and quieter. You wanted to be the person your person turned to first, and you married someone who already had that person, and she got there 29 years before you did. That's the ache that doesn't resolve, not jealousy, sequence. You spent your whole single life imagining the day someone would finally make you the center of their world. And then you found out the center was already occupied, lovingly, permanently. And that loving him meant loving a man who would never quite understand why a thread of 41 messages could make you feel so completely, specifically alone. You stay because he's worth it, most days. You stay because the alternative is a divorce that his family will, of course, find out about first. And you stay because somewhere in all that noise is a real man who really chose you. Second, but chose you, and you decide daily whether second is a tragedy or just the shape your love happened to take. The phone buzzes. 42 messages now. You don't open it. For 1 minute, you let the family wait on you. It is the most married you felt all week. You didn't lose him to another woman. You lost him to a group chat. And the worst part is, they all genuinely loved you, right up until the moment you asked to be loved first.